So I just finished the museum and it's fairly quick. I would say it takes about an hour to walk through, maybe an hour and a half if you really take your time. And it really was a very kind of deep, serious type of museum, as predicted, kind of like the Holocaust Museum. And it went through a lot of things I didn't know. I would recommend it. You get a lot of details about the impact, physically and emotionally, of the victims, and I learned a lot of things. It's quite somber, but you learn a lot you don't normally know. Um, Apparently, there's a thing called keloids that happens from the scarring that causes continual pain from all the burns, and the shock waves from the impact was so strong that it, like, you see all these clothing garments in the museum, and the clothes are all tattered, like ripped and stuff. Like the impact from the bomb literally like caused all these holes in the clothing. And then you see the actual personal stories of a lot of these people, and it's very sad. There's a lot of young kids, 11, 6, 3, 12, 13. There's like probably over 50 to 100 personal stories of people, either children who died or parents who died and left their children, or they all died, or they lost most of their relatives. So it's rather sad. At the same time, I don't regret coming here. While I did want a fun trip to Japan, I think this was worth seeing, to see the good and bad of our history, and not to forget what happened. I think so. This museum and the park and a lot of the monuments are dedicated to essentially worldwide peace, as well as not repeating an atomic bomb, and really emphasize the devastation and the impact that people don't see. And I don't think a lot of Americans or people around the world really see the details of that impact unless they were to come to this. Because since I did, I think I learned a lot about this specific impact. Like, there was a lot of nuclear fallout that a lot of the people didn't know about. So even if you didn't die immediately, a lot of people unknowingly got kind of very sick for the weeks and months afterwards, and then ended up dying later, including healthy people who came into the town or city who were family members or loved ones who like kind of came in later. But yeah, there's a lot of graphic stuff in there. I think I'll show some of it, but some of it's just not going to be shown in this video until you come here. There's stuff around essentially really scary stuff with like pictures of people's bodies completely burned, or their skin coming off, or their faces completely sunk in, or even artifacts like there's a bunch of like artifacts of like glass bottles got melded together, all sorts of things that got melded together or carbonized from the impact of the bomb. I had no idea the amount of strength that bomb had. It's really quite shocking. They had a giant safe, but even with that safe, all the insides, like the currencies, the documents in that safe were completely carbonized. And then they had all these things. They had one where all these human bones got melded together. Like, they had a whole exhibit of like 12 different things that got melded together. Like all these watches, all these glass bottles, a bunch of like needles. And so it's a pretty quiet, somber experience. I think similar to the Holocaust Museum I went to, very quiet, no one was talking, except for a little baby who didn't know any better, probably like a 5-year-old kid who kept talking. But other than that, super quiet in there. Yeah, at first it was mostly paintings, artwork of the fire showing the sharp red and orange colors of the bomb and the fires afterwards. And then you started seeing a lot more photos, real photos of either the actual impact where they're completely burnt or partially burnt, or the photos of the people before, like when they're still healthy. And then they would give you the whole story. And while some people, I think they kind of like went through the museum quickly, I was one who kind of sat there and like read a bunch of those stories. And I recommend doing that because that's really where you get all the details of the devastation. And sometimes these people, they had their part of their skins burned off, not completely, sometimes only a fifth of it. And you hear some of these stories, like and they're very emotionally depicted. Where there's this one where this like 10-year-old kid was found by his mother days later, and he was telling his mother, "I'm so sorry that I got burned. You're gonna feel so bad." Not even caring about her himself, but how sad his mother was. And then saying, "Oh, don't worry, Mom, I'm going to survive because only a fifth of my body got burned. If it was a third or more, I would die, but don't worry, Mom, I would be safe." Unfortunately, he did end up dying later on. And I think that's a lot of these stories in here where some of them died instantly. They were like vaporized on the spot. Like there's this one excavation of a bank entrance, and you can see like the scorch marks where his body just got vaporized instantly. But then there's others where they told themselves or others that they're going to survive because they got like partially burnt or they weren't burnt at all. I don't know why some people didn't get burnt or hurt at all, but some didn't, or only partially. And then they ended up dying weeks or days later, either from the radioactive fallout or just from initial impact that they didn't realize how severe it was. So yeah, there's even some pictures of yeah, there's a girl there who's sobbing a bit, so she was definitely emotionally impacted. Who just walked past, yeah, she was sobbing. But there's photos of people with like purple dots all over their face, like something with the radioactive fallout happened where they had like purple dots and stuff. And a lot of the symptoms were essentially like the hair completely falling out, vomiting, high fever, purple dots, and then eventually death. So that's another thing. If you're in these zones, stay away from them or don't go to them until the fallout clears. Crazy world we live in that this stuff happens, and it gets me thinking because like obviously I know a lot of religious people or people who say like everything happens for a reason, or like or people who aren't necessarily religious but they believe in like law of attraction, or positive things are always meant to happen for you, or the universe is conspiring to do good things for you. But those type of people in Western countries, they never fail to consider like the Holocaust or something like this. Like we clearly see a lot of there's 140,000 people who died from this. Many of them who are kids, who are part of, like you hear these stories, they were part of a sports team in school, they were laughing, they were fun. They had this one depiction, a story of this girl who was super upbeat, outgoing, made friends with all the doctors and nurses at the hospital before she died because of her upbeat personality. Did they have some fate or thing conspiring for them to, make them succeed? So in that way, I have family members and people who believe, oh, like you manifested a good life. You manifested a good life. You did good things. Law of attraction. Everything's gonna happen for you. God or whatever. they're intended to make good things happen. And so they say these things, but then when you see the devastation and the arguably unfair death of all these kids and children, you wonder, like, okay, is there really such a thing? And so, yeah, this point being, this museum, highly recommend it. Check it out. You definitely learn a lot. It definitely gets you thinking, and definitely something that's completely different from the fun Japan trip that some tourists just go to. But I definitely think it's worth a stop here, and yeah, it definitely gets you thinking. And it, even that thing I just said, I've thrown that in the faces of a couple of them before. I'm like, okay, what you think it's all about, like the world is meant working for you and all this stuff, and then what about these things? And I don't feel like they ever really have a good answer. Like, someone will just say, oh well, maybe, but then it made the world a better place, so it was intended by God or whatever. I think that's just backwards rationalization. Or they'll say something else, like